Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth. Written by the Hanged Man 317 and read by Purple Star. Chapter 18. What are you doing? Shinsou looked back at her incredulously. Trying to pick up our unconscious teacher. What does it look like I'm doing? No. Era was already kneeling down, feeling her head shake before she reined her movements in to take something more respectable, less obviously red. A lake. A lake. She was a lake. Still waters, and she could let no wind ripple across her surface. Slate stone and amber, or perhaps something tougher even. Something that couldn't be scratched. This was a strange sort of spiral. Her mind felt clouded by loose thoughts as they stumbled from their overturned boxes, but she didn't feel the panic she'd normally associate with that image. Instead, concern was tossed about with everything else, until it was a vague concept swirling at the edge of her mind, slipping through her fingers every time she tried to grasp it. The world was attempting to spin beneath her feet, but she pressed down hard to keep it steady. Era felt as if she were the axis of a great catastrophe, the eye of a rippling hurricane that threatened to close in with every step she took. There was nothing left of her but instinct, training, flitting bits of knowledge that she snatched from the swirling wind and pressed together into something useful. We can't just pick him up like that. He hit the ground pretty hard. He might have a spinal injury. Era grabbed the unconscious man at his shoulders, digging her fingers into his loose clothing and steadying his head by keeping it locked between her forearms. From this position, she could see the dry blood that flaked and cracked along her skin, pushed to the side by the sluggish weeping of her wounds. Shit. She'd almost forgotten about those. Shinsou snorted, hovering with what Era recognized as a restless, near hysteria as she started to drag him across the ground. You look ridiculous. What? I don't know what to do. Just make sure I'm not going to run over a rock or something. We can figure something out once we get away from the fight. As if to emphasize her point, an explosion rocked across the USJ, accompanied by a huge plume of dust rising up for where All Might was no doubt fighting those villains. There must be a medical kit in here somewhere, right? This place is too far away from the main campus to not have something like that. Can you keep an eye out for it? It should be somewhere easy to see. Yeah, I can do that. Great.
Hey.
A hand rested gently on Era's shoulder, and she stiffened before forcing herself to relax once more. A quick glance to the side revealed it was just Frog Girl staring at her nervously.
You look kind of beat up. Do you want me to take him?
Do you have any medical training? Frog Girl shook her head and Era sighed, continuing to drag Eraserhead along. I think it's best if I do this then. Besides, it looks worse than it is. Trust me. Just a few scrapes and bruises. She looked doubtful, but didn't press it. Instead, Frog Girl turned to look up towards the grand entrance of the USJ, with a finger thoughtfully tapping her cheek.
Any idea how you're going to get him up those stairs? You said we shouldn't pick him up.
Era craned her neck behind her to follow Frog Girl's gaze, and cursed beneath her breath. It'd be better if we had a stretcher or a flat piece of wood. Something to secure him to, but... Maybe Yaoyorozu? Muttered Shinsou as he also stared pensively up towards the entrance. Frog Girl nodded.
I could go find her, get up. But I don't know where she might be. If she got caught up by that warp villain, she could be anywhere.
Who is this? Asked Era, ignoring the way her arms were starting to shake with the strain of breaking, healing, breaking again, and now dragging a fully grown man across the dirt.
A girl in our class. She can produce anything out of her body,
said Frog Girl. Era hummed, letting her eyes drift shut for a moment. Going off on your own is unwise. Hopefully she's still at the entrance, but otherwise we'll just have to sort it out. We can still carry him up the stairs as long as we're careful to keep him flat and hold his neck steady.
How do you know all this stuff?
Asked Frog Girl, before Shinsou let out a short huff of laughter. Don't ask her. She won't answer.
Oh, do you two know each other then?
We trained together for the entrance exam, said Shinsou simply. It was no use. This buzzing inside her head, it refused to abate. Era glanced at Shinsou out of the corner of her eye, and found his expression to be guarded, anxious, and jumbled up with little bits of emotions that she couldn't quite catch. I'm glad you're not dead, she said quietly, quickly turning her attention back towards her work, before anyone had the opportunity to catch her eye. He laughed a little more earnestly, the sound trembling with frayed nerves. Yeah, I'm glad too. You shouldn't have done that back there. I was going to be fine. Gonna be a smear on the ground, more like, Era muttered. But I did it. That's on me. Don't beat yourself up about it. I would have jumped in front of anyone. Shinsou huffed, crossing his arms as he turned away. I don't know why I bother saying anything. Beats me. Era felt the hint of a grin tug at her lips before banishing it. I'm sorry. I don't think this is the time. It's the only time. Her head was full of flies, her tongue was loosened by blood and fear, and it took all she had to keep her limbs from trembling. I've been acting like an ass, and I'm sorry.
Should I go somewhere else?
If Era was being honest, she'd almost forgotten that Frog Girl was there. No, you're fine, she said quickly, hesitating for a moment before asking. Sorry, what was your name again?
Asui Tsuyu. Call me Tsu.
Good. Now she didn't have to keep calling her Frog Girl.
If you two need to talk, I can go scout ahead.
We shouldn't split up, said Era. It's fine. Shinsou dug his fingers into his arms, before letting them fall loosely back at his sides once more. Yeah, you were kind of acting like a dick, but I shouldn't have used my quirk on you like that. I'm sorry, too. Cool. Great. Era gave a short bark of laughter, careful to keep from jostling Eraserhead too much. What the fuck is wrong with me? I guess it really does take a near-death experience to bring people together. Yep, there you are again. Glad to have you back.
Hey! Tsu! Shinsou! Era!
They all looked up sharply to find Uraraka calling down to them from the entrance.
We're up here!
Yeah, no shit, muttered Era beneath her breath, before another thought managed to break through the haze and mark itself as important. Wait! Uraraka! Eraserhead is unconscious. Can you come down here and help us out?
Oh, good idea,
said Asui, as Uraraka and a few other hero students hurried down the stairs.
Ochako can float him up without moving him around too much.
Era just nodded, eyes wearily scanning across the USJ for any potential threats. We'll be able to maneuver him much more easily. Any luck on that medkit? I haven't seen anything, said Shinsou with a wrinkle in his brow. Maybe there's one by the entrance. Asui nodded.
That would make sense.
With Uraraka's help, they were able to carefully move Eraserhead up the stairs, Era holding his head steady, and the other students keeping the rest of his body from getting jostled. Era was a little concerned by Uraraka's trembling hands and paling skin as they neared the top, but the determined set of her face brokered no argument, and she didn't release him from her quirk until Era gave the go-ahead. Unfortunately, the problem of moving Eraserhead had successfully distracted Era from the extent of his injuries. With him finally in a safe enough position, she couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed by the damage. Both arms broken, Bones in his face no doubt shattered. Ribs certainly cracked. Blood oozing from the nasty wound at his elbow. Not to mention the dozens of smaller injuries he'd accrued over this long, drawn-out fight with those countless thugs. Is he going to be okay? That was Shinsou, hovering behind Era's shoulder again as she knelt down to check Eraserhead over. Though he tried to hide it, there was a tremor to his voice that was unmistakable. And again, Era wondered what the pro had done to so quickly gain his trust. Yes, Era lied. It fell off her tongue as easily as breathing. As long as we keep our heads and don't freak out. No, I think there's a lot of damage to the walls. Do you think maybe one got destroyed in the fight, or... The world was too chaotic. She needed to bring herself into some sense of order, or she might just drift apart into a bundle of loose threads. Step 1, she muttered beneath her breath, ignoring the burning stares of the other students. Check airways, breathing, and circulation. Clear, clear, and clear. His breath was shallow, but honestly she couldn't have expected any better. He was alive. Step 2. Era gently pushed Shinsou aside to ghost her hands over Eraserhead's arms. Stop bleeding and immobilize broken bones. But how am I going to do that without a splint or bandages? Shit, fuck, damn. There was a spiral threatening to overtake her again, until another voice broke through the fog. If you need a splint, I can create one for you. Glancing over his shoulder, Era met the determined gaze of yet another hero student. This must be... Yorozu, then? The girl nodded, clenching her fist to disguise the shaking of her hands. Yes, my quirk is creation. I can create any non-living thing, if that would help. Do you have a limit? Asked Era sharply, not bothering to waste the effort on softening her voice. Yes, but I assure you I can create anything you require. I need 2 straight pieces of wood the length of his arms. I also need a lot of bandages and gauze, the non-adhesive kind. If you can make more, antiseptic would also be useful. Can you handle that? Of course. With a hum of crackling energy and the faint spark of power at her skin, Yorozu produced 2 splints and handed them over to Era, who hastily began to secure them to Eraserhead's arms, with the bandages she created shortly after. What an incredibly versatile quirk. The potential for infiltration, escape, adapting plans on the fly. Focus. Okay, I need you to listen carefully. Era spoke as she worked, winding the crisp white bandages around Eraserhead's shattered arms with as much caution as she dared. We need to apply pressure to the wound at his elbow, so hold that gauze over it and press down. Like that, yeah. When that soaks through, don't remove it, just add another one on top, okay? Yorozu nodded, a sure set to her jaw. I've taken a few first aid classes, so I hope I can be of some help. Thank God. At least someone here knew what they were doing. Everyone else, Era called over her shoulder. I need you to organize yourself by severity of your injuries. If any of you have head injuries, please lie down and stay still. Anyone with broken bones that pierce the skin, speak up now. Minor burns, cuts, and broken fingers should be okay to wait for a doctor. If anyone's losing a lot of blood, get over here and grab something to press against the wound. She waited to make sure the heroes in training were moving to follow her instructions, before returning her attention to Eraserhead. He didn't look good. Era drew a knife from her boot and began to cut through his shirt, not stopping when Shinsou flashed her an incredulous look. You had a knife the whole time? Yes, not very effective against a walking warp gate and a giant monster that feels no pain. After we got to the USJ, it wasn't like Shigaraki was just going to let me lean down and grab it. I may be stubborn, but I know a loss when I see one. You're cutting off his clothes. Wow, 2 for 2. One more and you win a prize. Why? Shinsou bit out. Are you cutting off his clothes? Only his shirt. I need to see if there are any other injuries to take care of. Such as... these. Era ripped through the top half of Eraserhead's hero costume, pulling back the blood-stained fabric to reveal a mess of stark bruises and seeping wounds. Based on the ugly mess of dark purple blooming along his sides, Era guessed that his ribs were broken, or at least fractured. Luckily, it looks like nothing here is bleeding too much, but the bruising was violent and indicated internal bleeding. A lot of internal bleeding. His face looks really messed up. Ding, ding, ding! Era gently pressed a couple of her fingers to the side of Eraserhead's neck, relieved to still find a fluttering pulse. 3 for 3! You win a prize! Would you stop being a... I can't do anything about his face right now, okay? Era fought to keep the frustration from her voice. If he has fractures there, we don't want to fuck with that.
Sorry, I don't know your name, but I think he's bleeding a lot more than he should be.
Era's eyes snapped towards Yaoyorozu, and where she was pressing another thick wad of gauze against the one that was already drenched. Okay, that's fine. It wasn't. None of this was fine. He was losing too much blood, both inside and out, and any second now he was going to die, and it would be her fault, because she wasn't fast enough, because she was a coward who was too afraid to reveal her quirk, because she couldn't just let that villain melt the skin from her bones for the brief moment it would take to make him understand that she didn't need saving. Didn't deserve saving. Not from him. Battered, bleeding, broken. And for what? For her? Breathe. Just keep applying pressure. Shinsou, can you bring these bandages to the other students? She had to imagine her voice as a fine bit of wire. Any nudge or twitch would leave it wavering with shrill tones. She needed to stretch it taut, to keep it steady. He's going to be okay, but I'm going to sit here and make sure, so I need you to take these to the others. Can you do that for me? But... Shinsou. She sucked a breath between her teeth, busying her hands with bits of bandages and gauze that she hurriedly pressed to his smaller wounds. Steady. She was steady. I need you to do this for me. Please. Can you help me with this? Okay. As Shinsou walked away, Era focused her attention back on Yaoyorozu. I need you to listen very carefully to me. I'm going to ask you for a few specific items, and I need you to create exactly what I describe. Don't overthink it. Don't ask questions. Just make them.
What are you...
I need sterile rubber tubing 5 millimeters in diameter, 2 sterile syringe needles that can be securely attached to either end of it, and some swabs of antiseptic. Do you know how to make that? Yaoyorozu shifted uncomfortably.
Yes, but why...
I literally just told you not to ask questions. He was dying. He was dying, and there wasn't anything she could do about it. Era wanted to scream, but she'd learned long ago that never accomplished much of anything. Make it. Please. Yaoyorozu's lips pressed together uncomfortably, but she did as Era asked, handing all of the items over on a clean metal tray.
Is this... If you're planning on doing something, you should probably wait until...
Keep pressure on his elbow and monitor his breathing. Let me know if anything changes, and don't watch me. There must have been something, perhaps an edge of desperation in her voice, that lent her an undeniable intensity, because Yaoyorozu only hesitated for a moment before nodding and focusing on her task once more. Era breathed, forced it to be deep and still against the shuddering of her battered ribs. She'd only ever done this once before, and it hadn't worked. This time, she'd get it right. She needed to get it right. The only way to help people with a quirk like hers. Era slipped the needle through the flesh at the crook of her elbow, tensing her arm and watching as the tube flooded with scarlet. She was intimately familiar with the particulars of her quirk, the advantages it could afford others if she was just willing to stop being a coward and get over her fucking squeamishness. Every aspect of her body was infused with it, drowning in that capacity for regeneration. If she could just...
Shouldn't you make sure you're the same type of blood before doing something like that? Get out.
Era nearly leapt to her feet at the sound of Asui's voice, quiet and nearby to her side. As it was, the blood spurted from her arm more violently and flowed through the tube, while she hastily felt for a vein along Eraserhead's splinted arm. "I'm a universal donor," she hissed back. "RH null. The risk is minimal. And he's dying." The words caught in her throat, and she turned back to Eraserhead, keeping an eye on the shallow rise and fall of his chest, and raising her arm up so that the blood might flow more freely.
What about you?
Asui's expression betrayed nothing, head tilting to the side ever so slightly.
This seems dangerous.
What about this whole fucking situation isn't? Era snapped. Breathe. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
No, you're right. You seem pretty knowledgeable, so if this is what you think we should do, then I'll trust your judgment. Get up.
Thanks.
We managed to sort out our own injuries, I think. No one seems seriously hurt.
That's good, said Era, tensing her hand in even pulses to keep the blood flowing as she looked out over the USJ. How do you think it's going out there? Another explosion shook the facility, accompanied by a series of smaller booms and cracks. Asui followed her gaze with a frown.
I mean, All Might's taking care of it. That means it's probably fine, right?
Heroes lie. Right. There was nothing left to do but wait. It was agony at her trembling muscles, hands twitching for something, anything that she could do as time slipped by. She felt herself start to become lightheaded, through the fog already taking up residence in her mind. But that wasn't much cause for concern. He needed the blood more than she did. It wasn't much, but it was all she could do. All aspects of her body retained some regenerative properties, until they were properly assimilated into a host. And though blood alone wouldn't be enough to heal broken bones, it might help to stem some of the internal bleeding, and keep him alive long enough to get some real medical attention. Another earth-shuddering explosion. And Era looked up just in time to see a streak of black fly by and crash through the ceiling of the USJ, disappearing into the clouds. She narrowed her eyes. Was that? Dude, that was awesome! Shouted one of the other hero students. I think that was that bird villain! All Might must have knocked him right out of the USJ! Time slipped away, her grasp on awareness starting to crumble. Belatedly, Era realized that perhaps giving away so much of her own blood after she'd already suffered several injuries was not the wisest of avenues. Maybe he'd be fine. Maybe she was just overreacting. A glance over at his unconscious body was enough to dismiss that thought. My fault. The doors burst inward, and Era's attention snapped towards the sudden arrival of countless pro heroes, led by another one of the 1A students. Thank fuck. One of the heroes rushed forward, raising a gun and firing off several shots. Era stared, unable to hide the shock, as the crack reverberated through her body with a familiar tremble. Heroes can have guns? The surprise, mingled with faint amusement, melted away when Yaoyorozu spoke up, panic in her voice. Era? Era is not breathing. My fault. Move. Keep pressure on the wound, but get out of my way. Now. Not now. Not now. She was so fucking close. So fucking close to making this right. It couldn't end like this. Does he have a pulse? She asked briskly, placing her hands over Eraserhead's chest and ignoring how the red-filled tube jutted from her arm awkwardly.
I don't know. I can't tell.
Okay. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Make sure to be careful of his face. Don't exacerbate the injuries. Good. Check for a rise of the chest. Nothing. Okay. Now again. Again. Shit. Shit. That didn't sound like a good noise. When did Shinsou return? Had he always been there? I think you broke his ribs. Well, he is currently in a state of actively dying, so I feel like that's the least of his concerns right now. Era snapped, feeling the strength drain from her arms as she frantically tried to keep herself awake. And honestly, he already has so many fucking broken ribs that I don't think he'll notice a few more.
Kid, you need to back away.
Who was that? She was slipping, spiraling, drifting off to something else. No, I can do this. An arm wound its way around her waist, and Era instinctively lashed out with an elbow before being bodily lifted away from the unconscious man. No, I can do it. I can fix it.
Relax, kid. Jesus, you really pack a punch. Wait, what the hell is that in your arm?
Breathe. Era stopped struggling, let herself go limp in the pro's grasp. I apologize, I didn't mean to hit you like that. She couldn't see. Or rather, the world was far too blurry to make anything out clearly. That was probably bad.
Right. The paramedics are taking Eraser, so you don't have to worry about that anymore, okay?
Okay. It wasn't. And Era wanted to scream. But she fucking couldn't because... Don't give them the satisfaction. And...
I think she's going into shock.
What? Shock? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, said Era, unsure how the words had slipped out of her mouth. Yeah, I think you're right. Should we get her to an ambulance too, then? What? No. An ambulance meant the hospital, and the hospital meant doctors and machines and operating tables. She couldn't. She wouldn't. I won't. That's her best bet. She seems... Holy shit, kid. Calm down. I won't go. No, that was weakness. Why was she allowing her thoughts to slip to the surface like this? Foolish. Are you still a child, little bird?
Kid, calm down. Just... fuck, midnight, can you?
On it. The world became sickly sweet. Her senses flooded by a nauseous sort of sugar dust that swirled against her ears until she couldn't fight its tug. Then everything was dark. End of chapter 18.